What do India's 79th Independence Day and a high-stakes summit in frozen Alaska have in common? More than you'd expect. Picture this. While fireworks were lighting up Indian skies, Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin were locking eyes in Anchorage, Alaska. And that meeting, it wasn't just about two superpowers playing Cold War cosplay. It shook India's diplomatic chessboard like never before. Trump meets Putin in the middle of a geopolitical snowstorm, and suddenly, India's entire playbook gets a frosty reboot. Buckle up, because what looked like a photo op turned into a stress test for India's global strategy, tariffs, oil deals, and all. So, here's the setup. On August 15, 2025, at Elmendorf-Richardson Air Force Base in Anchorage, Trump and Putin sat down for a rare face-to-face while the world held its breath. The Ukraine crisis was raging, tensions were high. And this wasn't just another handshake summit. It was nuclear-powered theater. Now, India's move? New Delhi didn't sulk in the corner. It welcomed the summit, backing it as a step toward peace. The Ministry of External Affairs echoed Prime Minister Modi's favorite line. This is not an era of war. India positioned itself as the cool, collected adult in the room, cheering dialogue, diplomacy, and the faint hope that global fireworks might finally be replaced with actual negotiations. But before we dive in, if you're new here, hit the subscribe button and leave a comment. I subscribe. And I'll personally welcome you into the family. With that said, let's get started. Number 1. India's earnest expectations. Now, before the summit, India had its hopes lined up like a Diwali wish list. Colorful, ambitious, and maybe a little too optimistic. First on the list, relief from those suffocating US secondary sanctions. Why? Because India has been snapping up discounted Russian oil like it's on a Black Friday sale. It was a sweet deal, cheap crude, stable supply, and a perfect way to keep domestic energy prices under control. But Washington wasn't thrilled about India cozying up with Moscow. The expectation was simple. Trump would walk out of Anchorage, flash his signature grin, and say, sanctions? Forget about it. Spoiler, that never happened. Second hope, tariffs. Remember those punishing 50% tariffs slapped on Indian goods? That's like being told your favorite cricket team is banned from playing at the World Cup. Indian exporters, textiles, steel, you name it, were being hit hard. What India wanted was a rollback, or at least some breathing room. The dream was that this historic summit would end with Trump offering India a friendly handshake and saying, let's make trade fair again. But dreams don't always pay customs duty. And then the third big hope. India wanted to keep playing its favorite diplomatic sport, balancing. Walk with Russia for cheap oil, smile with the US for defense and trade, and stand tall as a non-aligned power. If the Alaska summit actually de-escalated global tensions, India could glide between both camps without choosing sides. That was the ideal scenario: cheap fuel, tariff relief, and geopolitical breathing space. In short, India expected Alaska to deliver a diplomatic buffet where it could fill its plate with everything it wanted. Number 2. Reality punch. What actually happened? But reality? Oh, it hit like a snowball to the face. No relief. None zilch. The Alaska summit ended without the faintest hint of sanctions being lifted. Washington stayed tough. Instead of getting a pass on Russian oil imports, India walked away still staring at the same restrictions that make every crude oil shipment feel like a diplomatic juggling act. Tariff tensions, still frozen solid. Trump's trade advisors didn't budge. In fact, they doubled down, basically saying, if India thinks tariffs are melting away in Alaska, they'd better bring a blowtorch. So those 50% tariffs? Still there, still biting, still a massive headache for exporters. And then came the cherry on the ice-cold cake: diplomatic dissonance. Trump, in his signature self-congratulatory style, claimed he had successfully brokered peace between India and Pakistan. Yes, you heard that right. He took credit for a ceasefire breakthrough. New Delhi, of course, wasted no time rejecting that narrative. India made it clear that, nope, they weren't signing off on Trump's fantasy deal. That claim not only embarrassed India diplomatically, but also hinted at friction brewing between New Delhi and Washington. Punchline: India walked into Alaska expecting a warm diplomatic jacket, cozy, protective, reassuring. Instead, it came out shivering, draped in policies that were still ice cold. Number 3. Strategic ripples. Why it matters. Here's the thing: India didn't fly into this summit naive. It knew big power politics is like poker played with nuclear chips. But Alaska drove home some uncomfortable truths. First, no summit glamour points. Just because two world leaders grab coffee in a freezing airbase doesn't mean policies magically shift. Trump may love the drama, Putin may enjoy the optics, but India learned the hard way. Charisma and photo ops don't translate into tariff cuts or sanction waivers. The substance was missing, and India realized that global applause doesn't put cheaper crude in the barrel or open up trade routes. Lesson learned: don't confuse showmanship with statesmanship. Second, autonomy under test. Alaska ripped the band-aid off. India's energy basket is still too dependent on external deals. Its exports are vulnerable to tariff shocks, and its middle path of non-alignment gets shaky when the big players won't compromise. Every global tremor in Washington or Moscow ripples straight into New Delhi's strategy room. The summit highlighted just how exposed India remains to pressures it cannot fully control. Third, talk the talk, but prepare your own path. India can preach dialogue and diplomacy all at once, but without alternatives, it's just wishful talking. Alaska underlined the urgency of building real options: diversified energy suppliers, diversified trade routes, diversified alliances. If the US won't ease tariffs, India needs stronger EU, African, and Asian partnerships. If Russian oil comes under tighter sanctions, India needs fallback energy agreements elsewhere. In short, diplomacy is the song, but self-sufficiency is the dance. And India better learn both. Number 4. India's diplomatic playbook reloaded. So, what does India do with this cold reality check? Rewrite the playbook. Alaska wasn't a win, but it was a masterclass in what not to rely on. Lesson 1. Don't overplay summit diplomacy. Alaska proved that big leader summits are great for headlines but lousy for policy results. India needs stronger institutional frameworks. Think long-term treaties, multi-nation platforms, binding trade deals. You don't build resilience through photo ops. You build it through paperwork, persistence, and patience. Lesson 2. Cultivate bipartisan relationships in the US. If India leans too close to one American administration, say, a Trump White House, what happens when power flips? Suddenly, India's gains turn into bargaining chips. To avoid volatility, New Delhi needs ties with both Democrats and Republicans, ensuring its interests aren't tossed around like a football every election cycle. Lesson 3. Prioritize strategic autonomy. This isn't about defiance, it's about survival. India should only follow UN-mandated sanctions, not Washington-imposed ones, and it must be willing to push back when unilateral pressure threatens its national interest. Alaska reinforced that if you rely on another country's goodwill, you're only as secure as their next policy mood swing. Lesson 4. Diversify the diplomatic playbook. The Alaska chill showed that India can't just keep dancing between the US and Russia. The future lies in multipolar engagement, deepening ties with the Quad, the G20, the SDO, Africa, and the Global South. The wider the net, the less India will drown if one partner cuts the rope. In other words, Alaska didn't hand India a victory, but but it handed over a blueprint. Stop depending, start diversifying. At the end of the day, the Alaska summit wasn't India's golden ticket. It was a cold wake-up call. No sanctions relief, no tariff rollback, no magical peace deals. Just a reminder that India can't wait for global powers to solve its problems. The real strategy lies in building resilience, diversifying alliances, and owning its autonomy instead of chasing diplomatic theater. Alaska may have been icy, but it lit a fire under India's foreign policy playbook. With that said, thanks for watching. Hit that like button, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. And until next time.